Hi, I'm Alicia Harlov.
I'm Lisa Aegis Gillibert.
I'm Catherine Christensen.
And I'm Becky Bond. And welcome to the Hoof to Horse podcast, where we dive into important discussions on horse care, welfare, and bettering the equine life. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Hoof to Horse podcast. My name's Becky, and today I have with me three of the instructors from the Hoof to Horse Academy. Alicia of the Humble Hoof, based in the United States, Lisa of the Glorious Hoof, based in Australia, and Kat of Forenza Park Equine Services, also based out of Australia. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that gets a lot of debate, both in professional hoof care circles and in the equine community at large. And that topic is, can and should horse owners learn to trim their own horses? And I can't think of a better group of people to talk about this with, because each of you is an accomplished hoof care provider in your own right. And you're all also educators. So I'm sure that you each have taught various owners something about trimming over the years. So I guess without further ado, let's just dive right into it. In your opinion, why might owners feel driven to learn how to trim? And as part of that question, should owners learn how to trim their own horses?
Right? It's a big question.
It is a big question.
You start, Alicia.
I was going to say, I don't know about you guys, but did you all start by trimming your own horse?
I think that's
Yep.
something that's really interesting when you start off like in the trimming industry rather than the farrier industry. Like that, I always find that interesting. Like farriers tend to come into the industry as apprentices at 16, 17 years old, and they often haven't trimmed before they go out and do their apprenticeship, compared to a lot of us that are trimming our own horses and we kind of fall into the industry that way.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think about when I started trimming my own horse, because you're thinking about, should owners trim their own horses? I don't know that I should have been trimming my own horse when I started. I definitely didn't know enough, and I was just super frustrated with he had lameness issues. Basically, everybody was telling me it was just going to be that way. He had, fine feet, but he had a navicular diagnosis, and I was just so determined to get him sound that I was like, I'll just do it myself. But I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just kind of tinkering, which is probably not a great, characteristic of an owner who wants to trim their own horse if you're just like tinkering, because that's when you can do too much.
But were you like just doing it by yourself, or did you have mentors and professional support?
So I did have, I didn't actually have like a trimmer or farrier that I worked with consistently. And that was also just me being not a great client, in all honesty. But I did have, there was a trimmer in my area that worked on a lot of horses at the barn I was boarding at. And she was amazing because she would come and like watch me and show me things. And she was great. Her name's June O'Brien. And she was so helpful. And Beth Lynn Lewis, in New Hampshire was also really helpful. And I just knew them through, they had trimmed for me here and there, and then had, taken an interest in helping me to learn. So yes, I did have guidance.
Yeah. We're just doing it by yourself. I always think, so yes, horses these days are pets, right? Rather than livestock. But traditionally, they've been livestock. And most other livestock owners know how to take care of their animals' feet.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? So why don't horse owners know how to at least trim a healthy hoof? I think that that's part of horse ownership. Even if you don't do it yourself, you should know what is good trimming, what a good healthy hoof looks like, how to do it in an emergency. I started off trimming my own horse, my pony. I was only 12 years old, and he was naughty for the farrier. So I probably should not have been trimming him, but I did ride him a lot, and he had great feet. So he kind of had a council trim, as we call it, which is just ride him on the roads. But I first started trimming for other people a bit more like in a paid sense, instead of just, I want to trim your horse, when in Australia, I think it was in 2007, don't quote me, but we had equine influenza come here. And because Australia's got quite excellent biosecurity laws, we don't have equine influenza here. So everything was kind of, it was like a horsey COVID, right? Everything was shut down. So I was the only one on the adjustment property where I kept my horse at the time that knew how to use a rasp, and horses' feet were falling apart and shoes were falling off, and I knew how to take shoes off and trim hooves. So that's kind of how I got my start doing, like, collecting a few of my own paid clients. But I'd been only an owner trimmer, and I was probably not should not have been taking paid money, for doing that service. But it was in the interest of equine welfare in that particular scenario. I think it was okay.
Yeah. So I was very spoiled. When I moved to Australia, I got onto Sarah Kleiken's books, and she sort of took me under her wing a little bit, and I went and collected a handful of ponies from the market and brought them home, and they were a bit feral and a bit unhandled, and that's how I got into trimming. Was Sarah was like, can you get some tools, because I can't touch this pony but you can touch him, so let's get you trimming his feet. And then I trimmed him. And then when she came back the next time, she was like, why don't you rasp these ones in between? And then by the time she was coming out to do all the other horses on the property, and I was just trimming I think I had six at the time. So I trimmed my six, and she just checked them when she came out. And then it was like, oh, well, now I don't need to do them. I'll just check them
Yeah.
and go from there. So
I didn't know
good on your
that.
theme trimming. No, and I look at the photos of the feet that I used to trim, and I'm like, what was I thinking? But I think that's really cool to be able to look back on as well. And I think
Definitely.
when owners, from my experience, like start working on their horse's feet, they care so much, and they're taking so much notice of everything that they do. They end up doing a good job, even if they don't have all of the anatomy and the biomechanics knowledge. They care so much, and they take so much notice of how they move and what's going on, that they actually end up doing a really good job. They can spend a lot more time looking at their horse than I have, that I can do with what I'm being paid to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
great point too, because, obviously we want owners approaching their horse's feet with some level of education. But at the end of the day, the owner sees that horse every day. They know the intricacies of that horse, and not just about like how they feel in their body. They know their management. They also know best how that horse likes to be handled for
Yeah.
trim. So like Kat, you were saying you had ponies that your professional at the time was struggling to touch, but you could. And so I think there's a spectrum too. So I think sometimes like when people talk about owner trimming, it's like all or nothing, right? Like
Yeah.
this person is just uneducated and doing it on their own and whatever. But I don't see that as often as I hear about it. What I see more is people who partner with their professional to
Yeah.
learn more about trimming. And maybe they start off just like maintaining hooves between trims, which is a really great place to start because there's not so much pressure on making big changes. It's just like learning how to maintain your horse's feet in a good shape while using some very basic tools.
Yeah.
Do you guys find the same, that there's really a spectrum to it and it's
Yes,
less about like all or nothing and more about partnership?
definitely. I teach a lot of my owners to how to use a rasp and how to do a little bit in between. And it goes one of two ways. They end up becoming a student of mine
Yeah.
and then become a professional, or, they just really want to concentrate on their own horses and are really excited about just having even one more way of improving their horse's life and improving
Yeah.
the welfare of their horse's hooves. And I really enjoy the back and forth, and seeing those horses less often, but when I do see them, the hooves still look really good. I quite enjoy that. And yeah, I think that you say, Alicia, that you weren't a very good client, or you wouldn't have been an ideal client back then, but I feel like you would have been my ideal client because you're so passionate about it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've always been passionate about it since Vinny started having issues. And I always joke that like if Vinny had a dental issue, I probably would have been obsessed with teeth, but he had a hoof issue, so I'm obsessed with hooves. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, it's so true. I don't think any owners are going to go out there and want to see their horse sore or lame or do anything that would make their horse sore or lame. So I do think that often they're much more conscientious
Yeah.
than even a, well, I don't want to say a more experienced hoof care provider, but somebody who maybe is starting out in hoof care professionally. An owner trimmer may actually be more conscientious with their horse than somebody who is a more
Yeah.
novice professional.
And
Um,
I do my only like hesitation there is sometimes they get a little stuck. Sometimes they look too much and too often and want to change something every day. And sometimes I've got to say to them, it's okay, just don't look at them for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You're
And
So
allowed
that's
to walk away and stop stressing about it.
yeah.
and that's like a great segue because I think when you work as a trimmer or farrier, at some point somebody is going to approach you asking if they can learn something about trimming on their own horse. So
Yeah.
as a professional, when somebody approaches you with that question, what are the things that you're looking for in the horse and the hoof, but not just in the horse and hoof, also in the owner that would signal to you that they might be a good match for owner trimming, at least in part?
Something was percolating in my head, which is, I think, fits here. I don't want them to learn with the only motivation being saving money.
Yeah.
A thing for me that if you're just doing it so that you're saving money, you tend not to have that. Like, it's just not your thing. And that's okay. Maybe you just want to ride or this or that or the other. And I'm not saying that you're a bad person, but that's generally not a good enough motivation for me. For me, it's the clients that put the lead rope over the neck and hang over, or when I say, "Oh, look at this," and they go, "Ooh," and they really interested, and the ones that sit there and I'll put a hoof down at the end of a tired day and they go, "Oh, what about this flare there?" And I'll look and I go, "Oh yeah," and then
That's yeah. Yeah.
of course, the owners that pick things up and that are really interested are definitely what I look for in my owner trimmers.
Yeah, I think, I can usually see the same kind of thing where if it's an owner that is just doing it to maybe save some money, they want to skip a cycle or they want to go longer in a cycle, and they're not necessarily as passionate. I mean, not that everybody has to be like super passionate, obsessed with feet, but they're maybe not as passionate about what they're doing or looking for when they're doing it,
Yeah.
as opposed to the owner that is like you're saying, like asking questions while I'm working or has been asking questions in the past. And then like retaining that information,
Yeah.
like the next time, like, oh, look, that horse, he did grow that flare again and we took it last time and it came back. Or, oh, that bar's laying over this time. Or, they're noticing things
Yeah.
as we're working together. So then, at that point you can say, well, do you want to do some of this because you're picking up on things that, I'm looking at too, and you're naturally gravitating towards that. Just that inherent sort of curiosity about it, I think, is a
Yes.
really good sort of, characteristic.
Definitely.
For me, I leave a rasp
Yep.
and I come back in my 5 weeks, and if they've done something, that's awesome. And like we keep having an ongoing, and it's interesting because the owners that start out doing stuff don't always continue. But just watching like get more into it, or do they like lose interest and get less? And that's
Yeah, because
okay.
it's
Like
hard.
it is hard work. But yeah, I require all of my owners still to stay on a regular cycle. And then
Yes.
what I do is I say, like when I come back in the 5 weeks, I say trim them just before I come, or trim them leading up to when I come. And if I don't need to do anything, I won't charge you for it. And then that sort of, if we get a few cycles in and they've done it and I don't need to, then we can skip a cycle. But
Yeah.
I'm coming back in 5 weeks to check your work, because the ones that are just trying to save money are often also the ones that don't actually do it.
Yes.
Yeah, they push out actually trimming their own horses and that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, I think that sometimes it seems like, once they actually try it, they're like, I'd rather just pay somebody. This is
Yeah.
hard,
I get that a lot. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I also so I run owner trimming workshops. And so I try and encourage them to come along to a workshop to learn some anatomy and some biomechanics so that they understand what they're actually having an influence on before they get loose with too many tools.
Yeah.
No, I think that like we talk about how such a small amount of leverage on the foot can impact the health of the whole limb. And I think owners who are just learning sometimes don't understand that even little amounts that they remove or leave can impact the whole horse. So I love the idea of having owners have some sort of background learning, whether it's giving them some reading to do or having them go to a clinic. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
It's also watching them invest in it and
Yes.
seeing what they do with that information, like whether they're willing to invest or put the time in and stuff like that. Get really, I think one of my frustrations is sometimes like I run a 2 day workshop and they're like, I can't put 2 days aside to come and do that. And I'm like, well, how can you not be able to invest 2 days in your horse's welfare?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
To do it properly, you're not necessarily going to be saving any money at first.
Mm-mm.
No, I mean, it's probably going to cost a lot more money, in all
Yeah.
I
So
would
honesty.
hate,
either you need to invest in some education or you're going to be forced to invest in some veterinary bills.
yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but you're investing in tools and,
Yes.
yeah, there's so
And
much more to
also,
it
the
than
better
just
your tools are, the easier it is.
Yes.
right, right,
And so that's the
exactly.
other problem I have sometimes with owners that are trimming. They go out and buy cheap tools, and then it makes the job even harder.
Yeah.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
it's more dangerous if you're working
Mhm.
on a horse with cheap tools or dull tools, and then you're not able to
Cutting
do it in a
yourself.
precise way, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess we've really thoroughly discussed, I guess, green flags in owner trimmers. But I think, Becky, you asked as well about what we look for in the horse.
Yeah, like what are some feet or things about the horse behavior wise that you would look at and say, like, I feel comfortable having the owner have a hand in this process?
Mm.
What are some examples of feet and horses that would make a good owner trimmer project? And what are some examples of feet and horses that are a no, that a professional really needs to be involved?
Mm.
Well, we'll start with like behavior sort of stuff. So for me, I want the horses to be really relaxed and chilled, and they should be able to stand pretty quietly, either with the rope hanging over the fence or tied up or hanging on their neck. And I should be able to move around all 4 feet without the horse sort of moving around and doing anything. I should be able to put them between my legs, pop their legs up on the stand, and them just go along with it because I
Mm,
want owner trimmers are going to teach their horses bad habits. So I want the horse to start from a good place before they learn the bad habits so that we've
Yeah.
got a good place to go back to.
And also when you're learning, you really concentrate on that hoof, and it's harder to be more aware of your surroundings and what's going on with the horse. And that can be dangerous if the horse is not the type that is just really comfortable, really chill, happy to have like we hold the hoof in the air for a trim for what? Couple of
3 minutes.
minutes, two,
yeah.
3 minutes, and then down and then pick it up and do another minute and then we're done. Whereas an owner trimmer, you're going to take a half an hour per foot when you're learning, and the horse is going to need lots of breaks. And it just, yeah, a patient horse, a horse that's got a lot of patience and is very happy to just stand around
Yeah.
is a green flag for me.
Yeah. I am really cautious about letting owners trim young horses
Mm,
because that's to me, it's not setting them up for success. You want them to have as good an experience as possible, that you get the job done and you get out of there. So
mm.
I talk about like putting money in the money jar and taking money out of the money jar. When we're trimming, we're taking money out of the money jar. And if the trim takes longer or the shoeing takes longer, you're taking so much money out that it might run out and then you're in a shit show.
That's a great
Mhm.
analogy. That's a really great analogy. I talk about, attention spans, and you can, the more horses you work with, or the more you work with one particular horse, you understand when their attention span is running thin.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think, I did a recording the other day and I was talking about how I feel like I've got one or two more pickups of this hoof and then the horse is going to be done with me. So I
Yeah.
got to get what I've got to do done before I
But
need to
that's
pick up the
not
hoof
going to
again.
be an owner trim kind
That
of
is not an
horse.
owner trimmer horse. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then feet wise, I want them to have good feet. So good,
Yes.
healthy feet, not being subclinically laminitic, not being
Mm.
thin soled.
Yes.
all of those things to make their life as easy as possible so that they're forgiving. I don't
Yeah.
want feet that they're going to swipe the rasp one too many times and make them sore.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing with thin soles, really. I do have an owner trimmer that works on a horse with thin soles, but it's been a number of years that I've worked on the horse and I still work on the horse in between. And she has a very specific set of things that she does in between, some very, very important rules around it, mostly because I can't be there every couple of weeks. Yeah. What do you think about horses with naturally long toes for owner
I think it
trimmers?
depends. Yeah, I think that, I was thinking about this the other day in terms of owner trimming. And I think a lot of times long toes can be something where if the owner wanted to roll the toe every week in between professional trims, that can really help you get ahead of the long toe without having to like chop it all off and make them sore all at once.
Yes.
But I guess it depends because obviously we know those cases of horses with hoof castle rotation or laminitic horses or horses that
Mm,
have, long-term caudal failure that are so sensitive to every little change that you do and they just like shoot out foot that I wouldn't necessarily want the owner,
yeah.
messing with that.
Yeah. I think any horse that has sensitivity after a trim, after a professional trim, should not be an owner trimmer, necessarily an owner trimmer horse, unless the horse does so much better with weekly or
Yeah.
fortnightly trims. Small
Mhm.
changes, little and often. Maybe they're going sore because they're on a 6 week cycle and it's just too much hoof to take off to get back to good balance to think about the next 6 weeks.
I would just like to add in there that if they're going sore on a 6 week or a 5 week cycle, that's not normal. So I
It's
don't
not.
want to normalize that. And that is
No.
something we need to be really concerned about. But there are owners that can definitely manage that quite
Yeah.
well with a full trim.
And I think if the owner is aware of, okay, this is a little tangent, but if your horse is going sore after a trim and it's a regular cycle, the horse is, on a 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks schedule, and it's regular and the hooves look fairly healthy and they're going sore, it's usually a management, something needs to be tweaked in the management. The
What do you
diet, the
mean by the money?
environment.
Thank you.
Yeah, diet, environment, grass, stress. And like, this is not the conversation to have with that, but just for owners listening, thinking, oh, he goes sore every time someone trims him. I'm going to start trimming him because then I can do less. You also need to look into the management. I'll leave that there. That's another podcast.
Mhm.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's a great point because even if you're going to take over your horse's trims, you still need to have a team around you to help you with management and help you with the horse. So you should have a mentor. There should be another professional that you rely on, that you can ask questions. Because I think all of us, I mean, even when you get to the professional stage of trimming, there are times when you get stuck on horses and you're like, I don't know where to go with this and I need help. So people need a mentor. You
Yes.
need a good vet. You need somebody who knows your horse really well, who, if the horse is getting sore, they can come and run some diagnostics for you, figure out why that's happening. So I think the point that everybody is making in this group here is trimming should never happen in a vacuum or in isolation. You need to
Yeah.
have a team around you, whether you're doing it independently or not. And even as professionals, I mean, how much continuing education do we do ourselves to continue bettering ourselves? How many other professionals do we know that we are constantly bouncing ideas off of? How many veterinarians do we talk to so that we learn more and more and more?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest danger when you first start learning anything, but trimming in general, is you get a little bit of knowledge and you think you know everything.
Yeah.
And then the longer you work at it, the more you realize you don't know, and you get to a certain point in your professional career where you go, I feel pretty competent, but there is so much to learn. I will never possibly know everything because every horse is an individual and there's always something new to learn. So one of the things I see with my owner trimmers when they first start learning is they get almost overconfident in the beginning until
Mm-hmm.
they that first point of like, uh-oh, something went wrong. And then they start realizing, actually, I was talking to an owner trimmer the other day, and when she first started trimming, she said to me, I can totally handle my 3 horses. They're all such straightforward, easy trims. And I just went back for a check in with her. It's been about like 6 months that we've been working together. And she said to me, oh my God, are any horses straightforward? And I was like, every horse has things. And she has horses with very healthy feet, but they're all a little bit different. And she finally, like, the light bulb went off and she was like, oh my gosh, there's no such thing as a straightforward trim. Like, they all have things that we need to be thinking about. You can't trim on autopilot.
Yes. You cannot trim on autopilot. Yep.
I remember
Definitely.
when I first started, I was talking to another hoof care provider friend of mine, and I had just left full-time teaching. Like I was a public school teacher. And I told her how I felt like trimming was so much harder for me than teaching, even though there's so many different students and you have to consider every single different personality and learning style and how you communicate with them and the ways that they, can best handle correction, things like that. But when it comes to a hoof, when you're first picking up a hoof, there's so many things you're looking at. And sometimes when you're starting, I mean, often when you're starting, you don't even know what you're looking at. So you don't even recognize, like, you might not even see the laid over bar, the underrun heel, the little, like, divot in the white line that's suggesting something's going on. Like, you won't see all of that. And so when you're trying to make a decision, for example, like if I'm looking at how much do I want to bring the toe back, I'm considering how deep are the collateral grooves? How does the health of the frog look? Where is that, center of rotation of the coffin joint? How much would it like hurt the horse if I brought it back to where I want it to go, or should I try to do it slowly? I'm considering all these different things. Whereas when you first pick up a hoof, you're like, oh, hoof wall. Oh, there's
Yeah.
the frog. Like you don't really know exactly what you're looking at. And so when I first started, I was like, I don't know how to make these decisions. And now, because we're
Mm.
talking about not being on autopilot, now I don't want to say that I never want to be on autopilot, but it is like a lot of this stuff sort of like goes into you see it and you sort of just make a decision
Mm-hmm.
intuitively
Yeah.
based on your past experience. And it becomes easier and harder as you go because
Yeah.
like Becky was saying, the more you do it, the less you
Mm-hmm.
feel you know. But you do have that experience where you can draw upon the things that you've done in the
Yeah.
past.
Kat has an excellent slide in her.
I do. I was just thinking
You
about
were
that. I'm
thinking of
like,
it? Yeah.
it talks about like conscious incompetence. So this is one of the slides so in my workshops, and I think it's really cool and really good for owners to sort of be aware of the four stages of learning. So you start in unconscious incompetence, and that's where you are completely unaware of what skills you don't have, you're inexperienced, and you can kind of be really confident because you don't know what you don't know. And then you get to a place of conscious incompetence, and that's now where you're aware of the skills that you don't have. That's where it's really uncomfortable. And often, if you've been to clinics where people start crying because they are now aware of the skills that they don't have and they're beating themselves up because of it. So they're beating themselves up because they did things to their horses that they think they shouldn't have done or whatever else.
Mm.
And then you get to a place of conscious competence. And that's what we were talking about before. It's when you have the skill, but you have to think about it really hard and you have to think about all the decisions you're making. And when we start out as professionals, we're doing that and you're looking at things and trying to like work it out. And then you get to a place where you have unconscious competence. And that's when you can execute the skill really easily. You can talk about the weather, you can talk about how the horse is going under saddle at the same time as working on their feet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like muscle memory, I guess. Someone
Yeah.
described this unconscious incompetence, unconscious competence to me as like a good analogy is when you're learning to drive a manual car or a stick shift, I think you guys call it in North America, where when you're first starting to learn your unconscious incompetence and you're bunny hopping the car and you're stalling it all the time and you just don't know what you're doing wrong. Then you got your conscious incompetence where you're trying to get it, going well. Your conscious competence is where you're like, okay, my revs are this, I should be in second gear, okay, and I need to press a clutch and you know what you're doing. But then unconscious competence is when you're driving along in traffic, you're changing your gears, you're singing all the lyrics to your favorite song, you're having a discussion with your passenger, blah, 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 and you just don't even think about the way that you're changing gears. It just happens. That's what unconscious competence is like.
So
That
I
might be
guess
a
that
bit.
brings us to a really great point of like, we kind of know what we're looking for in owners who would be good candidates for trimming. We know some red flags in horses that probably need to have a professional involved.
Mm.
Are there ever cases where you've been involved with an owner, or even in a more general sense, like where an owner should maybe be given the feedback that they need to call in a professional, like a professional needs to come and take over at least for a period of time, or perhaps things aren't going quite right and they need
Mm.
some help.
Yep. I've got a couple of examples. One of them is seedy toe resection. I think that should be a professional job, because you're so close to live tissue when you are resecting out some seedy toe. And in my experience, in my area, seedy toe white line disease does not just grow out with management. It has to be resected. And another one is you got to be really careful if your horse is growing high heels, say they have a club foot, and you think I'm going to fix that by just trimming down the heels. You can't necessarily just trim down those heels. Just because a horse has got, or everything that's in, you need to know your anatomy, because there's anatomy inside the hoof, up the leg, that if you just take those heels off, you can cripple the horse. Cripple the horse. And
Or,
if you are,
injure their soft tissue.
you can, you injure their soft tissue. If you just take the heels off, even if you do a little bit at a time, you got to be really, really conscious of what you're doing there, because you can, you can injure them. So that's something where I've had to say, I think that these heels need to be managed professionally.
Yeah, probably any horse that's got like massive deviations in the legs. So there's some horses that even for me, we call it like I call it my 20% that are tricky for me to sort of like, yes, I can trim them quite happily, but I have to think about it in order to work out which way the limb's going, where they're breaking over, the best way to trim them, and then I video them to make sure that I'm happy at the end of
Yeah.
the appointment. And that's not a horse that I'm going to let an owner be doing much on, because you can have such a massive effect, and
Mm,
we're not trying to just trim to sole plane or trim
mm.
to an easy external landmark that
Yeah.
owners can see.
Yeah, that's the difference. Healthy, not like healthy,
Straight leg.
biomechanically sound
Yeah.
hooves are easy to trim to sole plane, or all these systems that people have out there, because they fall within that realm of normal. The second anything is slightly outside of that realm of normal, those systems don't work anymore, and you need to take a bigger picture. You need to step back and look at it as a bigger picture, and you need to be aware of so many more things. And owners, that can be really difficult if it's not your job.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
if that's the only horse you're seeing,
Yes.
you don't have enough information coming in for you to be able to pick up when something's gone wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, this is normal for him.
No. That is my
What?
least favorite saying in the whole
Yeah.
wide world is that's
Yeah.
normal for this horse. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I see a lot more horses for you,
Yeah.
and that's not normal. That's
There's
not
normal and then there's common.
Mm.
And just because it's normal for a horse doesn't mean it's healthy for that horse, and doesn't mean that it's, something that we should be maintaining. I think the biggest thing here is that owner trimming is maintenance trimming, and it's not correctional trimming at all, is
Mm.
probably the succinct way of putting it.
Yeah. And when you were talking about like the club feet or the hooves that grow really tall heels, I think that it reminds me of times where like it's another sort of red flag for maybe
Mm,
not having an owner trim is if they're going to want to try to fix
yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
especially like all at once. Like if they're thinking, I'm going to correct this without taking into account all the other systems that hoof is relying on and also that it's connected to,
Mm,
can lead to a lot of issues and injury that, it's might cause irreparable damage if you're just, chopping
hmm.
off heels on a club foot, for example. It's not something that you can just do and say, whoops, it'll grow back.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
You cannot trim the hoof in isolation.
Hmm.
Everything is connected.
Everything is connected. Everything is
Yeah.
connected and needs context.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it
So
can
if
be
there's an
done.
owner,
Owner trimming
right?
can be done. It can be. We promise.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that I have had at least one owner that I have has asked to learn to trim, and I've said no for whatever reason. There are owners that I'll say yes to without hesitation, because I know the combination of owner and horse is going to work. And there are people that I have said no to. And it could be for whatever reason. You know, maybe I know they're not going to put in the work to learn what they need to learn. Maybe they're just doing it to save money. So they're not really, like you've said, that invested. Maybe the horse isn't the right fit, whatever it is. So, like for you guys, have you ever had a case where you've refused to teach an owner to trim for a reason, or a case where an owner's been trimming alongside you and you've had to say, hey, you got to stop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I have. Not very often, because my owner trimmers that I take on, like, I guess I've developed a really good feel for if it's going to work or not in that situation. I have had a situation where an owner trimmer has bought a new horse, and she said, "Can you come and show me how to trim my new horse?" And I've come there and said, "You can't trim this horse. Why didn't you contact me to see the feet before you bought this horse if you wanted to trim it?" And like, we did get the horse all right in the end, and I was able to teach her how to work around his idiosyncrasies, because she was very, very good with the tools, and she had a lot of, like, just horse experience. She did see a lot of horses. She rode horses for other people and whatnot. So she had more horse experience. And I was, and I knew that she could take care of the horse once we got him to he towed in quite a lot. So I was able to make like a system for that horse that worked for that horse, but I still came and saw him quite regularly until, I don't know, she's moved out of the area or something. That was my experience. But yeah, I think that's the only time I've said, no, I need to trim this horse.
I think I get asked a lot to teach people to trim that aren't my clients.
Mm,
And I will say no unless because I'm like, they need the dedication. So I'm like,
mm,
it's not like I'm going to come teach you to trim in a few hours and that's us done. Like
yeah,
I've got to see that they're committed enough to follow through rather than
yeah.
me teaching them enough for them to be dangerous. That's what I get worried about.
I charge an hourly rate for teaching trimming,
Yeah.
not my trim rate. So
Yeah.
I've found that I get, I'll get asked, yes, of course. I can, like, oh, can you teach me how to trim? And I'll say, yes, of course. This is my hourly rate for teaching trimming. And they go, oh, oh, okay. And then, I'm like, set it up whenever you like. And then they don't ask again. Not because I'm trying to price them out, but because it takes longer for me. So I need to make sure I'm still hitting my business goals, which is important because that pays my mortgage and looks after my children. But also it helps to, again, that's that willingness to invest, right?
And I don't know about you guys, but I've invested. I would hate to think about how much I've invested into my knowledge and education and career. And as much as I'm so willing to share that knowledge, they have to, like, I'm just not going to give it away to everyone for free.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because if it's free, then it's not as important,
Yeah.
I think. And like, if I estimated how much I've spent a few $100,000
Oh, well and truly.
easily on my education, which is why I'm able to do what I do and all the rest of it. And I love teaching. I always have. I love mentoring. I love teaching. I just really enjoy it. So I'm probably a little bit more willing to give things away for for free. But there's a reason why we have paid so much for our education, because it's worth
Yeah.
that much. That knowledge is
Hmm.
worth it.
And actually, now
Yeah.
that you've talked about investing in your education, which I think is so important. One of the barriers that I ran up against when I did want to learn how to trim was that there was nobody in the area. So I did what you shouldn't do, and I had to piecemeal together my education. And
Yeah.
it was listening to podcasts and watching videos and reading books. And I was like voracious about it. Any content I could get my hands on, I was consuming. But eventually I did run up against, I need to get into a professional program because I'm not
Hmm.
doing 100% right by my horses. And I did end up having a horse come into my care who had very complicated feet.
Yeah.
And I knew enough to know that I wasn't going to do those feet justice with the knowledge I had. And I
Hmm.
didn't have professionals in my area that I could rely on to address his feet. So in that sense, if you are an owner trimmer, to those of our owner trimmers or people who want to owner trim listening in, where do you go to get good information? So we've already talked about you need to have a mentor. That's like the first step. But we live in this age where there is so much information and it's not always 100% apparent what information is reliable. So where do they
Mm,
start? Where do you get
yeah.
started?
It's so hard. And there's so much misinformation about trimming online now and it's so emotive and it's like story driven, and you don't actually see the failures that come through with with these, cookie cutter trim style um like systems. It's damaging horses. And these really, yourself, Becky, you've gone and had to become a professional to be able to trim your own horses. And there needs to be a stepping block between that, right? And this is where owner trimmer clinics are great, but not everyone has access to that. But what does everyone have access to? The internet, which is where a lot of these owner trimmers are getting their information. Funny you should say that. The four of us work together because we are really passionate about that evidence-based education and being able to deliver that in a way that is like it can be trusted, right?
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, if we're looking at red flags for where to get your information, you touched on it for sure. If there's anything that's saying that there's one way to trim or there is a method that is
Mhm.
like ABC, this is what you do, and every hoof is going to be this exact style or this exact approach, that is like the most glaring, screaming red flag.
Yeah.
That, or if there's
I,
like a one single guru that is like the, end all be all of knowledge and hoof
Everybody
care.
else does it wrong, and only we know how to do it correctly. And
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I really appreciate about you guys is that we even all four of us, I think, have slightly different approaches or we have different educational backgrounds. And it complements, I think, each other really well in the sense of like we can bounce ideas off of each other. And that's super important when you're looking for education and also a community to
yes,
learn with,
yes,
is that
not one guru. Yeah,
right. You can talk to each other about different cases. You can make sure that there's not like a scolding of like that's doing it wrong in term. I mean, obviously there's things that can harm and you want to be held accountable to that. But you want to make sure that nobody's trying to impose one set ideal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yeah.
I think that's a great point. Like education should be varied. And that doesn't mean that everything you learn from one person, you need to take every piece of that. So, like
Mm,
every time I go to a clinic or every time I've gone to a mentorship, I've really tried my best to practice the skills that I learn. And then over time, I learn which of those techniques and skills actually fit my trimming style, my horse's feet,
yes.
my client horse's feet. And it adds to my toolbox.
Yeah.
So, anytime you're trying to get all of your information in one place with one like dogma to it, you're
Mm,
missing huge piece of the picture. And that's what's so cool about having so many professionals, to take your information from,
yeah.
because you can learn a little bit of something from everybody.
Everyone.
I don't think any of us trims exactly the same, but that's a real benefit
Yes.
because every case needs something different. I mean, I definitely, Alicia hears from me quite frequently, on client horses, and I'll be like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. And, her experience has helped me quite a bit as I've gone on my own professional journey. And I'm sure you guys have had the same experience with mentors and things like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
I have this like thought process when it comes to horse training and it applies to feet as well. And it's like like no one's going to do something that doesn't work. So if someone's
Yeah.
doing something, it's because it works for someone. So you just got to find the situation that it works in.
Works for. Yeah.
So you just like learn as much as you can and then like
Yeah.
see where it could possibly work. And you might
Yeah.
find like down the track that you have a technique that you've never used, but you have this horse and you're like, I'm gonna try that and it might work. And it's just really
Which,
handy to have all those tools
which
in your toolbox.
definitely, which is fantastic for professionals. But as an owner trimmer who has one, two horses and wants to look after their own horses,
Dangerous is
it's too much.
yeah.
There's too much, and having, um, you know, I guess having one one or two places to be able to get, reliable information from is super important, so that then you have got a decision-making framework. So if you do come across a different technique, you can say, oh, I see how that would work, or, oh, that probably wouldn't work for my horse because of XYZ, so that you know a little bit more of that conscious competence. Like, how do you get to that point as an owner trimmer?
And I think you need to be able to follow someone long enough to know their whole process and be able to do that pretty easily before you can bring in new information.
Yeah, yeah. And being able to put it into context.
And that's what I think is really cool about what we're trying to create at the Hoof to Horse Academy, because so in my professional life, I also worked as a college professor in an equine sciences program. And a lot of the people that came to that program were people who were owners who had nowhere else to get reliable information. So they had to commit to like a full university course, but not everybody wants to commit to a degree. Yeah. So it's nice to have some schooling available where you can not have to put that, we've talked about wanting to invest in your education, but like if you don't want to get a degree and you just want reliable information, that's what we're trying to create at the academy. A place where people can go where they have multiple professionals with different backgrounds. So there's varied information and varying points of view, but also, people who have qualifications behind them, who have experience, who care about the current science, and who are also constantly bettering themselves in their own education so that they can serve the population of students that they're teaching most effectively. Yeah.
And having experience with teaching owner trimmers outside of a full written program, I think is important. And for owner trimmers being able to have access to any of these mentors. We're speaking about ourselves, but any of us as mentors, because we each have different specialities and different hyper focuses and interests, and being able to access that. Like, I have learned so much just being a part of this, and reading each other's materials and watching each other's videos, and just being like, hey, yeah, and that's clicking here. And even as a professional who's been in this for a long time, it's shaping up to be a really wonderful community. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you guys think that we didn't cover? Is there anything else you want to say to an owner who's thinking about trimming, or anything else that we didn't cover today?
If you are already thinking about or interested in trimming, talk to your hoof care provider and, start asking questions. And, don't be quiet about it. If you're just like sitting here and you're like, oh, I think I want to do that. If you're already thinking about it and you're already interested in it, then you should just see where it goes. And obviously, check out our, Hoof to Horse Academy, and we would love to support you. But it's definitely, if you're already thinking about it, go after it a little bit and see where it leads.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way that you say talk to your hoof care professional, because they know your horse. So they're going to be able to help you decide whether being able to trim your horse yourself is something that would be achievable now or in the future, with the right supports. It's a really good idea. What were you going to say, Kat?
I was just going to say, do it. Like,
just do it.
On the rasp, and just like talk to your professional, of course. Yeah. Don't be too scared about it. Like, we've talked about lots of things, but if you're just doing a little bit here and there to start with, like most horses, you're going to be pretty safe.
Yeah, dip your toes in.
Yeah.
You can dip your toes in, see if you like it.
Find a really dull rasp.
Yeah. With a really dull rasp.
Yeah.
Wear gloves. Okay, that's my tip. Wear gloves. Okay? Wear your gloves and protect your hands, because you'll get covered in scars.
Yep. And you never know, if you dip your toes in, you might find yourself ending up like the four of us eventually as a professional.
Yeah,
it's true.
It happens a lot. And we would love to, like, the world needs more dedicated hoof care professionals who are well educated, and like, we need to multiply ourselves, because otherwise it's just like the industry is just not going to be. That's another passion of mine, is the hoof care industry from like a business point of view. We just need more passionate people to be able to cover all the horses. Yeah,
absolutely.
Anything else, guys?
I think that's it. I'm really happy.
Yeah, well, great conversation. That was awesome. I hope a lot of owner trimmers get to, or prospective owner trimmers get to listen and get some encouragement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a lovely day,
Have a
guys.
good day
I
slash
love
night.
evening.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's Hoof to Horse podcast. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to check out the Hoof to Horse Academy, an online learning platform for horse enthusiasts and professionals. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode.